We are now at a very special place in Salzburg, in St. Sebastians Friedhof. The saint's statue in front of the church shows him stabbed with arrows. He became the patron saint of people suffering from the plague, of people dying, of gardeners, policemen, coffin bearers, and many more. This cemetery was given the name of St. Sebastian in memory of those who died from the plague. The Archbishop Wolf Dietrich von Reithenau built the famous Schloss Mirabell, formerly called Schloss Altenau, for his wife and his 15 children. He felt the need to tidy up Salzburg since he wanted to have more space in front of the cathedral. So he decided to remove the cemetery located there and use St. Sebastian Cemetery from then on. Many famous families were buried here. Amongst them was Mozart's family. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was buried in Vienna in a grave which was never really discovered. Everything seems to be correct here about Mozart's family except for Leopold Mozart, who is also listed in this headstone. His remains are not in this grave, but over there in another part of the cemetery. We can also find here the crypt of Christian Doppler, who discovered the Doppler effect. The house where he was born is on Marktplatz. Let's have a look at another grave, the tomb of the famous Paracelsus, who was a natural scientist at the time of Martin Luther. The grave of Paracelsus is here in a niche of the St. Sebastians Friedhof behind St. Sebastian's Church. The natural scientist Paracelsus was born in 1493 in Switzerland, just after America was discovered. He earned himself a name in the medical field throughout Europe, came to Salzburg twice and spent his last years here. Paracelsus changed a few fundamental things in the medical environment. At first he was somewhat provocative. Like Martin Luther about the church and the Bible, he said, "Stop speaking in foreign languages like Greek and Latin. Teach people in their national language." Subsequently, Paracelsus taught medicine in German. Secondly, he clearly stated that he was against the old treatment and teaching methods which had been adopted from the Greek and Roman period. He mentioned that his time was over and that people had to get back to nature. He referred to the famous Hildegard von Bingen and spoke about the importance of naturopathy and a health and balanced diet. In his opinion, this was much more important than the ancient teaching. Paracelsus' famous saying was, "It's the dose that makes the poison." He was rather young when he died in Salzburg. He was buried in this niche, which looked differently in the past. Not so long ago, during the chaos of the Second World War, when Salzburg was bombed, every time there was an air raid, the monks who lived here were ordered to take Paracelsus' remains, which were kept in a glass box, and to bring them into the cellar. After the attack, they had to put the box back in the crypt. When American troops marched towards Salzburg, nobody was sure whether they would or would not want to take Paracelsus' remains. He was such a famous person after all, to another place outside Austria. The captain in charge of Castle Hohensalzburg at that time decided to do something completely different and took Paracelsus' remains to hide them in his bedside table. They remained there until the Americans left Austria. It was only then, when Paracelsus' remains came back to this place and that this memorial was erected. The St. Sebastian Cemetery is the only real Camposanto north of the Alps. There are several in Italy, and one of the most famous is in Pisa, just behind the Leaning Tower, which is worth a visit when you're in this area. But what is a Camposanto? It is a cemetery which is surrounded on four sides with niches and graves with little altars. On memorial days of relatives or friends, one can celebrate a mass in front of these altars. There is also an economical background to this Camposanto. The ground on which it is built belongs to the church as well as to the town. And the financial contribution of the town was supposed to be higher than the one from the church. Wolf Dietrich von Reithenau is buried here in the Gabrielskapelle. Wolf Dietrich considerably changed Salzburg. When he ruled the city, it was completely dug up, with one construction site after the other. As the saying goes, the only construction site that was completed during his lifetime was his own tomb.